I was 32 that winter. An engineer who built things that stayed where they were put. Unlike the people I was born to. Christmas at my father's house in Minneapolis always felt less like a reunion and more like an audit, everyone silently ranking one another's worth. Walter sat at the head of the table, eyes bright as he handed Ethan a boxed Rolex, his voice booming with pride, while I smiled across the candles, pretending not to notice how the room shifted to orbit him. When my turn came, he slid a thin white envelope toward me and said, "Here, kiddo. Maybe luck will finally help you for once." Laughter broke around me as I unfolded a $2 lottery ticket, its edges already creased as if it had lived in his wallet for weeks. My brother grinned and said, "Hey, maybe you'll hit it big and buy yourself some confidence." My father chuckled, pleased with the cruelty he'd disguised as humor, and lifted his glass to the chorus of amusement that followed. I said only, "Thank you, Dad. I'll treasure it." Because silence has always been the language that made him most uncomfortable. After dinner, the air smelled of pine and resentment. The men argued about investments while I gathered plates to feel useful. My grandmother, Lydia, frail in her wheelchair but still sharp, motioned for me to come closer. "Don't leave yet," she whispered, her hand trembling as she pressed a folded paper into my palm. "There's something you should see." Her eyes, pale and steady, lingered on mine until I nodded. In the hallway's weak light, I opened the paper and saw her signature. The words "deed transfer" typed above it. And beneath, the name Ethan Callahan. The ink was faded in places, the edges smudged by someone's thumb. Yet the meaning was clear enough to cut through every noise from the dining room. I folded it again before anyone noticed and slipped it into my coat pocket, hearing my father's laughter echo from the table, rich and satisfied, as if generosity and dominance were the same thing. That night, while snow layered the driveway and the lights blinked across the eaves, I drove home with the envelope still on the passenger seat, the cheap lottery ticket tucked beside it like a punchline I hadn't learned to laugh at yet. At home that night, I laid the folded page beneath my desk lamp and watched the ink fade into the paper's grain. The stamp from Hawthorne Legal Associates ghosted along the bottom edge, half erased, as if someone had tried to make it disappear. I typed the firm's number into my phone, my voice steady when a receptionist answered, and asked if they had any record of a deed transfer for Lydia Monroe or Ethan Callahan. "No file by that name," she said after a pause, "and we've never notarized anything under that address." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the ceiling until the plaster lines blurred together. The next morning, I drove to Lydia's small house, snow rising in gray banks along the sidewalk, and found her at the kitchen table sorting pills into a plastic tray. She looked up, surprised. When I asked if she remembered signing anything with my father or Ethan, they told me it was about refinancing, she murmured, fingers trembling over the bottles. I didn't read it all. I trusted them. I asked where the papers were now, and she said softly, "He took them back to keep them safe." I sat beside her and unfolded the photocopy. "Bah. This signature, it's yours. But the rest isn't." She studied it, squinting through her bifocals, then whispered, "That's my hand, but not my will." For a moment, the clock ticked loud enough to fill the whole kitchen, marking time she couldn't reclaim. "They said it was temporary," she added. "Just until the taxes cleared," I said. There were no taxes, only a transfer, and folded the paper again before she could see how badly my hands were shaking. She pressed her palm over mine and said, "You were always the careful one. Nora, find out what they've done." I promised I would, even though I already knew what the answer would cost. When I left, she called after me, "Don't fight them with anger. Fight them with proof." Her voice cracked on the last word. thin but still certain. Back in my car, I spread the photocopy across the steering wheel, tracing the blurred date 6 months ago. The same week, Ethan posted a photo of himself closing a major deal online. The edges of the document smelled faintly of cologne, the same kind Walter wore. The evidence wasn't much, but it was enough to open a door that would never close again. I placed it carefully in the glove compartment beside the $2 lottery ticket, both symbols of chance, one born of mockery and the other of fraud. When the light turned green, I started the engine and said out loud, "All right, let's see what truth looks like on paper." The sound of my own voice in the empty car felt both foreign and final. The house was empty when I arrived, quiet except for the furnace groaning in the basement. My father and Ethan were gone for the evening, and their absence felt like permission. I went straight to the study, where the smell of dust and oil hung heavy, and opened the filing cabinet that had once been his pride. Inside, folders bulged with tax forms, bank slips, and contracts yellowed by years of smoke. Halfway through the bottom drawer, I found a blue folder labeled Property Transfer, Monroe. My name wasn't anywhere on it. The deed was there. The original, thick with embossed seals. Lydia's signature steady in black ink, but the rest written in a different pen. Darker. Sharper. The date had been changed. The notary stamp pressed twice as if someone had aligned it wrong. When I held the paper to the light, 2 sets of initials glimmered faintly beneath the ink. One real and one forged. I called Clara from the back porch, my breath fogging the phone. "I found it," I said, "and read her the line at the bottom, executed and witnessed in accordance with Minnesota state law." She interrupted. "Send me photos right now." "Nora, that phrasing isn't used anymore. It's an old template. If they copied it, it's a fake." I sent everything, the pages trembling between my fingers, and waited while she clicked through the files. "You're looking at a forged signature," she confirmed. "And if your grandmother was medicated at the time, it's elder exploitation." I asked. "What happens if we prove it?" she said. "Forgery of property documents can void the transfer. It's criminal." "Nora." I pressed the phone against my ear until it hurt and whispered, "Then we'll make it right." Clara paused, her voice softer. "You don't have to destroy them to win," I answered. "I don't want destruction. I want the truth on record." The wind caught my words and scattered them into the dark yard. Back inside, I replaced the folder exactly where it had been, aligning the edges the way my father always did. Because precision was his religion. My reflection in the window looked calm. But the calm wasn't peace, it was focus. The photocopy in my coat pocket felt heavier than metal. The weight of every word they had made her sign. Pass 5 Sekunde. I locked the door behind me and drove toward the city lights. The document scans sent and saved. The silence between each heartbeat loud enough to measure distance. In my rearview mirror, the house shrank. Just another dark shape under snow. But I knew the truth was still alive inside it. Written in 2 kinds of ink. By the time I reached the main road, I said aloud, "They taught me to keep records. Now those records will teach them what integrity costs." The words didn't feel like anger. They felt like evidence. Sunday dinner smelled like roasted meat and false harmony. My father called it a celebration, saying Ethan had finally closed on that beautiful new property. And the table gleamed with china that hadn't seen daylight since before the bankruptcy. I arrived late on purpose, my coat still damp from the snow, the folder in my bag, making every step heavier. "You made it," Walter said, pouring wine, his grin too wide to be real, while Ethan leaned back and announced, "Guess who owns Grandma Lydia's house now?" I took the seat across from him and asked, "Her house? You mean the one she still lives in?" He shrugged and said, "It's just paperwork. Nora, we'll make sure she's comfortable." My father added. You don't understand these things. It's all family assets now. I looked at them both and said quietly, family assets. Forged signatures, same thing. Right. The silverware stilled. The air tightened. And Ethan laughed first, saying, Come on. Don't start. You wouldn't even know a contract if it bit you. I know this one, I said, pulling the printed pages from my bag and laying them beside the wine glasses. It bit all of us. My father frowned. What are you trying to prove? I told him. That Grandma never meant to sign it. And the notary stamp was reused from another file. Clara checked same serial. Same smudge. Ethan reached for the papers. But I slid them closer to me and said, Touch it and I'll make sure your fingerprints are part of the record. My father's voice turned low. You're embarrassing yourself, I answered. Not yet. But you're about to. I switched on the small speaker in my bag. And Clara's recorded call filled the room. Her voice was steady, under Minnesota law. This document is invalid. The date format and phrasing haven't been legal since 2015. My father turned pale. Ethan muttered, That's not real evidence. I replied, Neither is your loan. But Northlake Partners has your collateral on file. Ethan's glass tipped, red wine spreading like proof across the white cloth. He barked. You went through my stuff, I said. No. I went through Grandma's. The deed listed her address. Not yours. My father slammed his hand on the table. Stop this. Nora, she agreed. I met his eyes. You told her it was a refinance. You let her sign something she didn't understand. The room was so quiet the furnace clicking on sounded like thunder. Ethan stood, pacing. We did it for the family. You wouldn't help. You never help, I said. You don't help either. You just harvest, my father hissed. Enough. You're not ruining this. I leaned forward. It's already ruined. You sold what wasn't yours and called it loyalty. Ethan scoffed. You think a few papers will scare us, I answered. No. But a judge will. Walter tried to sound calm. We can fix this privately. I shook my head. You forged a signature. That's not private, he whispered. She's old. She won't testify, I said. She already did. She recorded her statement this morning with Clara present. The sound left his throat before he could find a word to cover it. Ethan grabbed his coat, muttering, This is ridiculous. My father called after him, but his voice broke halfway through the name. I gathered the documents. Every eye in the room fixed on the evidence they'd tried to bury. The investigation starts tomorrow, I said. You'll get your summons by mail. No one spoke. Only the ticking clock answered, measuring the seconds between the empire they'd built and the truth I'd just unsealed. When I reached the door, my father said, You're choosing outsiders over family. I turned back and said, I'm choosing the only family that didn't lie to me. The wind howled through the chimney as I stepped into the snow. The house behind me heavy with silence. The folder in my arms was warm from my grip. And for the first time, their approval didn't weigh anything at all. The first summons went out 3 days later. Clara called me that morning and said, They're officially under investigation for fraudulent conveyance and elder coercion. I asked, How long will it take? And she replied, Not long, there's a clear paper trail. Your grandmother's medical records seal it. I sat at my kitchen table, the snow melting from my boots, when she added, You did the right thing. Now we let the system work. By the end of the week, Ethan's company account was frozen, and my father's assets were under review. He called me that night. His voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. They came to the shop. Nora. They took the files. The computer. Do you have any idea what you've done? I said. I didn't do anything. You did, he whispered. It was supposed to help us. And I answered, You forged Grandma's name. There's no version of that helps anyone. He hung up before I could say another word. Ethan tried next. Look, he said, his tone all reason and desperation. We can fix this if you just withdraw the complaint. I'll transfer the house back. We'll start over, I told him. It's too late for that. The DA already filed. He snapped. You think you're some hero, you're tearing this family apart. I said, I'm not tearing it apart. Ethan, I'm just showing everyone what was underneath. His silence stretched long enough to tell me he finally understood there was no way back. 2 months later, the hearing opened in Ramsey County Court. I sat beside Clara while the state presented evidence, handwriting analysis, hospital reports, notarization inconsistencies. Ethan avoided my eyes, tapping his pen against the table like it could drown out the truth. My father tried to object when the prosecutor read the affidavit Lydia had recorded. They said it was just taxes. She had testified. Her voice faint through the speaker. I trusted them. I didn't know. When the recording ended, no one spoke for several seconds. After recess, Clara leaned close. They're offering a plea probation for your father if Ethan takes full responsibility. I asked. Will Grandma get her house back? She said. Yes. The court will void the transfer and restore title immediately. I nodded. Then take it. Later. When the judge announced the ruling, my father's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him like air from a punctured tire. Ethan's attorney whispered something about restitution, but his client was already staring at the floor, unmoving. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered near the steps. One of them called my name, asking, Are you satisfied with the verdict? I said. I didn't come for satisfaction. I came for the truth. The wind caught my hair as I walked away, the sound of shutters chasing me down the sidewalk. Pause 3 seconds. That night Clara called again, telling me the deed had been reissued in Lydia's name, recorded and notarized under her supervision. It's done, she said, and I replied, No, it's corrected. The distinction mattered. The house was safe, the lies documented, and the silence that followed finally sounded like peace. Spring came late that year, slow and gray, but the house on Willow Lane finally smelled like home again. Lydia moved back in 2 weeks after the verdict, her garden blooming despite the cold, and I spent every Saturday clearing the soil around her porch. She said once, It feels lighter now. And I answered, Because it's yours again. She smiled, tracing the wood of the railing she'd built with my grandfather, and whispered, No, Nora, because you stopped them. When I left her that afternoon, she pressed a small key into my palm. For the safe in the hall, she said, You'll know when to open it. I kept it on my keychain but didn't look inside. Some things deserve patience. Weeks passed. The investigation faded from the news, and the silence that replaced it felt like air after a storm. Walter sent a single letter apologizing for letting things get out of hand. I didn't respond. Ethan never wrote at all. Work filled my days again. Simple and clean, with nothing left to hide behind. One evening, as I locked up my office, Clara called to say the last of the restitution had cleared. You're free to walk away from this, she said. I told her. I already did the day they signed their names on something that wasn't theirs. The words came easily. Not like a declaration, but like the truth returning to its rightful owner. That night I drove back to Willow Lane and opened the safe. Inside were only 2 things: the original deed to the house and the $2 lottery ticket folded neatly beneath it. Lydia had written a note in shaky script, Value isn't inherited. It's proven, I sat there on the floor, holding both pieces of paper, realizing how alike they were, one stolen, one mocked, both symbols of worth others tried to measure for me. In the months that followed, I bought a small house a few streets away. Enough space for my tools and quiet. I planted wild tulips along the fence line, the same kind Lydia once grew behind her kitchen window. Sometimes she visited, sitting on the porch and telling stories about the years before any of this began. And when she asked if I missed my family, I said, "Not the way I used to." She nodded, satisfied, and said, "That's what freedom sounds like." Now, when people ask about the house, I tell them it belongs to the woman who never stopped believing in ownership earned by honesty. Blood gave me a name, but truth gave me peace. And I've learned they're never the same thing.